Genesis chapter 9, verses 1 to 17. Beginning at verse 1. And God blessed Noah and his sons and said to them, bring forth fruit and multiply and replenish the earth. Also, the fear of you and the dread of you shall be upon every beast of the earth, and upon every fowl of the heaven, upon all that moveth on the earth, and upon all the fishes of the sea. Into your hand are they delivered. Everything that moveth and liveth shall be meat for you. As the green herb have I given you all things. But flesh with the life thereof, I mean with the blood thereof, shall ye not eat. For surely I will require your blood, wherein your lives are. At the hands of every beast will I require it. And at the hand of man, even at the hand of a man's brother, will I require the life of man. Whoso sheddeth man's blood, by man shall his blood be shed. For in the image of God hath he made man. But bring ye forth fruit, and multiply, grow plentifully in the earth, and increase therein. God spake also to Noah and to his sons with him, saying, behold, I, even I, establish my covenant with you, and with your seed after you, and with every living creature that is with you, with the fowl, with the cattle, and with every beast of the earth with you, from all that go out of the ark unto every beast of the earth. And my covenant will I establish with you, that from henceforth all flesh shall not be rooted out by the waters of the all flesh shall not be rooted out by the waters of the flood, neither shall there be a flood to destroy the earth any more. Then God said, this is the token of the covenant which I made between me and you, and between every living thing that is with you unto perpetual generations. I have set my bow in the cloud, and it shall be for a sign of the covenant between me and the earth. And when I shall cover the earth with a cloud, and the bow shall be seen in the land, then will I remember my covenant which is between me and you, and between every living thing and all flesh, and there shall be no more waters of a flood to destroy all flesh. Therefore the bow shall be in the cloud, that I may see it, and remember the everlasting covenant between God and every living thing, and all flesh that is upon the earth. God said yet to Noah, this is the sign of the covenant, which I have established between me and all flesh that is upon the earth. The title of our message this morning, Genesis 9, 1 to 17, God's image and the death penalty. The past two chapters of Genesis 7 and 8 concern Noah's boarding of the ark, the destruction of the earth by a universal flood, and now the departure of Noah from the ark. Now Moses treats Noah's departure from the ark like Adam's first day in the garden. It's going to be real parallel between Noah coming out to his new earth and Adam when he came out to his new earth. Noah, like Adam, will be the patriarch of a new world, and it will consist only of his family. Just as God gave Adam dominion over the animals, so will Noah have dominion over the animals. And just as Adam was given food restrictions, so Noah will be given food restrictions. And just as God made a covenant with Adam, now God will make a covenant with Noah. There's a true parallel here. There are 4 points to our message this morning. Verses 1 to 3, Noah exits the ark as the new Adam. Verses 4 to 7, God's image and the death penalty. Verses 8 to 11, God's covenant with Noah, his seed, and the animals. And verses 12 to 17, the rainbow as a sign of God's covenant. Here in this chapter, we have God's covenant with Noah, chapter 9, verses 8 to 11. This covenant with Noah will be followed by future covenants with Abraham, Genesis 12, 1 to 3, with Moses in Exodus 19, 5 to 6, and with others. God's covenant always builds upon his previous covenants, and with each covenant, God reveals more and more about himself and his coming son. So we have our covenant here with Noah today. We come to our first point, verses 1 to 3. Noah exits the ark as the new Adam. Verses 1 and 2. And God blessed Noah and his sons, and said to them, bring forth fruit and multiply and replenish the earth. Also the fear of you and the dread of you shall be upon every beast of the earth, and upon every fowl of the heaven, upon all that moveth on the earth, and upon all the fishes of the sea. Into your hand are they delivered. The blessing that God now gives to Noah is meant to read exactly like the blessing that God gave to Adam. Remember, God said to Adam in Genesis chapter 1, verses 28 and 29, and God blessed them, and said God to them, this is God speaking to Adam, bring forth fruit and multiply and fill the earth and subdue it, and rule over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the heaven, and over every beast that moveth upon the earth. And so we see that here God tells Noah the exact same thing. See, Noah here is the new Adam. Both Noah and Adam were the only hope for the future race of humans. So God now commands Noah to imitate Adam in his replenishing of the earth. That's the first instance where we see Noah is the new Adam. In Genesis chapter 2, verses 16 and 17, God had also previously said to Adam, "Behold, I have given unto you every herb-bearing seed, which is upon all the earth, and every tree, wherein is the fruit of a tree-bearing seed, that shall be to you for meat." Here we have another one. Once again, Noah, like Adam, has been given dominion to eat all the fruits and vegetables that grow on the earth. Adam received his blessing as the first father of mankind, and now Noah receives the same blessing, with small differences we'll see today, as the second father of mankind. In both blessings, there is the command to fill the world with human life, to enjoy the food that God grew upon the earth, and subdue the world of animals. So God is commanding Noah to do the exact same thing as Adam. Verse 3. "Everything that moveth and liveth, says God, shall be meat for you. As the green herb have I given you all things." Here in verse 3 we see that God adds an additional food source for Noah. Here Moses says that Noah was to eat of everything that moveth and liveth. This means that the diet of Noah would go beyond that just given to Adam, which is vegetables and fruit. Adam had only been given the green herb to eat, but Noah will be given the animals to eat. We come to our second point, verses 4 to 7, God's image and the death penalty. Verse 4. "But flesh with the life thereof, I mean with the blood thereof, shall ye not eat." Okay. In Genesis chapter 2, 16 and 17, God made a food restriction for Adam. Which was, "And the Lord God commanded the man, saying, Thou shalt eat freely of every tree of the garden, but the tree of knowledge of good and evil, thou shalt not eat of it, for in that day thou eatest thereof, thou shalt die." The death. So, restriction to not eat from the tree. Now God here puts a different food restriction on Noah. Noah will be given dominion over the animals, but they will also be given to him for food. Now the text continues to compare Adam and Noah as mankind's first parents. So, in other words, just as Adam was to endure one food restriction, not eating from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, so Noah also has to endure a food restriction. Noah's food restriction will be to abstain from eating the blood of animals. Now that's a strange request, so we have to find out what is God's meaning in making him not allowed to eat the blood of the animal. Well, this food restriction, not eating the blood of the animal, is symbolic for two reasons. First, God had just destroyed a world of murderers. Beginning with Cain, who murdered, then Lamech, who murdered more. Because until the time of the flood, murder had become commonplace. God detested how man had grown so cruel towards one another before the flood. Therefore, God seeks to give a food restriction that will remind mankind that all life, not only of man, but also of animal, is precious in God's sight and never to be taken lightly. God orders that animals should not be eaten while the blood is still in them. God orders that some care must be given for the life of the animals. Now God knows that animals cannot think and do not know when they're being cared for after they're dead. But God wanted man to think about the shedding of an animal's blood and be reminded that animals were created by God and therefore thought should be given before taking their lives. The restriction of eating blood forced man to think about the precious life of the animals and not act like a savage towards God's living creatures. Now, let's just understand, I'm not saying not to kill animals or eat them. What God's doing is He wants to teach them a greater thing in the distance. So He says, take care of the animal's blood, because if you will take care of animal blood, then you'll be more likely to take care of man's blood. It's an argument from smaller to greater that we're coming to. As I mentioned, the fruit restriction of abstaining from animal blood was symbolic for two reasons. First, we have seen that man would learn that by shedding the blood of animals, they must do so with care and thought and without cruelty. The second symbolic reason that animals were not to be eaten with their blood was that it foreshadowed the shedding of Christ's blood for the remission of sins. Even now, in the days of Noah, man is being taught that blood is precious, and that when Christ came, His precious blood would pay for the debt of sin. what the reader is to learn from this verse. First, that God wants all the shedding of blood to be done with care. And second, that blood would play a major future role in the theme of redemption and salvation. That's what we're to take from that verse. And now we get to what he's really building to in verse 5 and 6. For surely I will require your blood wherein your lives are. At the hand of every beast will I require it, at the hand of man. Even at the hand of a man's brother will I require the life of man. Now God's restriction to care for animals is not for the sake of animals alone, but this blood regulation is for man. Man is supposed to learn something from this. God had just destroyed mankind because of its callousness toward the taking of human life. So God created parameters that would force man to think about shedding any kind of blood, even the blood of animals. It's going to make them more thoughtful. It is an argument from smaller to greater. In other words, if man can learn to care about the shedding of blood of animals, then he can learn to be horrified by shedding the blood of man. God teaches man that care should be given whenever life, even the life of an animal, is taken. Now, of course, the animals were given for food and clothing. They are God's gifts to man. But even God's gifts should be received with care without cruelty, is what's being said here. Now, God here has first talked about animals in order to heighten his second argument, which is against the shedding of blood of men by man. God says that he is the defender of human life, and he will require payment for every human life that is taken. This threat is extended both to man and beast. If a man takes the life of another man, God here leaves a threat upon their lives. He says, for surely I will require your blood. God says that he will even require the blood of animals that take the lives of man. Notice it says, at the hand of every beast will I require it. The animals themselves will not go unpunished when they do violence to man. If a wolf devours a man, God will punish it. It is even established in the law that a fierce animal or one of a malicious disposition devours a man, it will be put to death at the hands of man or a beast. Deuteronomy chapter 21, verses 1 to 9. Of course, it's not the animal itself that is guilty, but it is to teach man that God will not forgive any violent act against man. Even if it's done by an animal, God will avenge it. Even though the animal has no evil intent and acts only out of instinct or self-preservation, they still must be put to death. If man does not find the animal and that animal should escape, then God himself will judge and kill the animal. Now we know that an animal does not have a soul, and it can't be guilty of a sin, not even when it kills a man. But God is showing his judgment against the dumb animal in order to show how much he cares for the life of man that is made in his image. Verse 6. Whoso, now we're talking about mankind, not animals anymore. Whoso sheddeth man's blood, by man shall his blood be shed, for in the image of God hath he made man. Up to this point, God has been talking mainly about animals. As I mentioned earlier, it is an argument from smaller to greater. It starts with the animals, he moves to man. Man was to care whenever they killed an animal and not to do it out of cruelty. God even promised to avenge man should a wild animal take his life. Now we see God's meaning in talking about the animals, and it's this. If God cares for the animals enough to put restrictions on how they are treated, they don't even have souls, how much more does he care about man that was made in his image in knowledge, righteousness, and holiness? Man is God's highest creation. And God gave to man a human soul. And it's the human soul in us that is the life of man. The life of an animal is not a soul. The life of an animal is in their blood. Since God cares so deeply about his creation, he warns that if one man should take another man's life unlawfully, by the justice of man, the life of the murderer must be taken. God gives man the authority to take that man's life. It will be the responsibility of the governing authority to sentence a murderer to death. Moses here argues that anyone who takes a human life wages war against God. Anyone who murders another man steals God's image from God and destroys his image bearer. The murderer unlawfully takes what belongs to God. While life God makes, what life God makes, no man has the right to destroy. God will not stand for the marring of his image. In a sense, when we kill man, we kill God, or at least the image of God in man. We must understand that this is the reason the death penalty must always be in effect in every culture and at every time. Any person that destroys God's image in man must be put to death, or God will punish those who fail to avenge his image. We can let him go out of a nice heart, but now we're in trouble. Now the curse belongs to us. God commands the law to take care of murderers. The law is to take care of murderers. Our law. Therefore, any man that takes the life of another man, with the exception of self-defense, which includes war, capital punishment, and protecting one's own life from violence, that's not murder. That's lawful killing. Anyone who takes the life of another man must have their life taken from them. The murderer must receive a penalty consistent with the law to purge the evil from our midst. Genesis 4:10 and 11, Deuteronomy 21:8. And to deter others from also committing the same murder. Deuteronomy 13:11, 17:13, 19:20, and 21:21. It is the responsibility of the law to seek out those who kill, including abortion, mercy killing, euthanasia, all the things that they call lawful is still murder. Those people should be prosecuted under the law and put to death. And to take away their life because they have so callously taken the life of another and they have stolen God's image in man. The law further teaches that when a man goes free because the law fails to put him to death, there is a curse upon the land. That does not mean anyone escapes justice because God may kill that man in his own way. But God requires man to kill those who shed innocent blood. A single drop of blood shed in a city without justice condemns an entire city. This notion that a whole town, state, or country is guilty of the sin of a murderer if they fail to prosecute is further illustrated in Moses' law. Under the moral law, not ceremonial, that's nonsense. Under the moral law, if the body of a slain person happened to be found and no one knew who killed the person, the governing bodies had to determine the exact boundaries or jurisdiction that dead body was discovered. They had to find out where, in whose city or whose town, that dead body discovered. This was done because whatever jurisdiction that body was found in was now accountable by God to punish the evildoer. And if they failed to do so, that town with the dead body in it was now under a curse. If the authorities of that city or town were to find a body, and they were to have no way to determine how the body came to be murdered, they had to come before the people of that jurisdiction and declare publicly that they were innocent of the murder which had been committed in the confines of their city, and thus cleanse themselves before God by offering sacrifices to cleanse the land. If the exact jurisdiction of that crime could not be determined, then authorities from neighboring cities from which the body was found, they were all to come together to make an open declaration in order to cleanse themselves, and all neighboring cities offered sacrifices to God. If they failed to do this, there was a curse upon the land, even if they didn't know who murdered them. Even if they found a dead body, they had to offer sacrifices for that dead body, for the murder of that dead body. We can only imagine what stockpile of curses have been heaped upon American people due to our government's crime of murdering the unborn. Can you imagine how many sacrifices we owe the Lord over that we haven't brought forth? Can you imagine the curse on our land over that? Verse 7. But bring ye forth fruit and multiply. Grow plentifully in the earth and increase therein. The careless taking of life and the failure of almost the entire human race to bear the image of God was the reason the flood was sent in the first place. Callousness towards murder was the reason the flood was sent. Before God sends Noah forth to repopulate the earth with people, he gives these restrictions about blood, and he requires Noah to practice capital punishment against cases in which the image of God is destroyed. That's how we're going to destroy it. That's how we're going to save ourselves from another flood. Not that there would be another flood. So was the lawlessness found in Noah's day before the flood would never happen again. With that warning, Noah is now sent forth to repopulate the earth with laws promised to severely punish all murder. Verses 8 to 11, our third point. God's covenant with Noah, his seed, and the animals. Verses 8 and 9. God spake also to Noah and to his sons with him, saying, Behold, I, even I, establish my covenant with you and with your seed after you. Here God makes a covenant with Noah and his sons, we're told, and their seed. There's three parties here. Noah, his sons, their seed. The seed of Noah, of course, refers to every single person on the face of the earth from the days of Noah until the day of Christ's return. This Noahic covenant is both a general covenant for all mankind, but it's also a private covenant for God's elect. God's general covenant to all mankind is a promise that he will never again flood the entire earth. All people, elect and non-elect, will benefit from this promise of never being flooded again. But for the elect, this covenant goes much further. It's a promise that God will always protect us from harm, and even when harm comes, it will come to our advantage. All of God's promises can only be applied privately when those who hear his promises believe it, lean upon it, and are so assured by it that they place their lives into God's hands. God speaks to all men by his covenant, but many choose to be deaf. The covenant is not for the deaf. It's only for those who will hear it and believe it. All who believe in the covenants can take God's covenants as short promises. God's private promise to his elect is that their faith in salvation, which is one grace wrought upon another grace for our benefit, will not remain only with the fathers of a household, but will be passed on to our children and their children. So we see that this promise to Noah does not end with Noah, but extends even to today. We notice that God is promising that he will establish his church, and in generation after generation there will be families that call upon God, unlike the days of Noah where there was only one family that called upon God. Verse 10. And with every living creature that is with you, with the fowl, with the cattle, and every beast of the earth with you, from all that go out of the ark unto every beast of the earth. Here we read what appears to be a strange verse in which God also makes a promise or a covenant with animals. The reader might wonder why God makes a covenant or a promise with a soulless animal. When they die, there's nothing there. We must remember that the animals were made for the benefit of man. God here promises for the sake of man that he will see that the animals are cared for. God will see to it that the animals have food, sleep, and are protected from harm, so that man might always remember that God has given mankind the animals as a gift in which to exercise man's dominion. God will never again take almost all the animals from man as he did in the days of the flood. Verse 11, And my covenant will I establish with you, that from henceforth all flesh shall not be rooted out by the waters of the flood, neither shall there be a flood to destroy the earth any more. Here God reaffirms his promise, which is to never send a universal flood to destroy the whole world. This does not mean that God will not punish a nation or even a people with a flood to punish their sins. It just will not be a large-scale universal flood. For instance, there were floods in China in 1887 which killed 2 million people, and in 1931 in China which killed 4 million people. Even the Johnston flood in Pennsylvania in 1889 killed 2,200 people. God will still use local and national floods as an instrument of his will, but he never again will use a flood to flood the entire earth. Still using floods as punishment. Verses 12 to 17. Finally, the rainbow as a sign of God's covenant. Then God said, This is the token of the covenant which I make between me and you and between every living thing that is with you unto perpetual generations. I have set my bow in the cloud, and it shall be for a sign of the covenant between me and the earth. God is not content to propose his covenant to Noah, his seed, and the animals, just in words, but he wants to add a sign, so that men might be continually assured that the earth will no longer perish by a universal flood. He tells Noah that this sign will be a rainbow in the sky. The rainbow would be a guarantee of the promise, the covenant. Yet God has authority over his own creation to use his creation. Now the rainbow already existed before the flood. It was just a natural phenomenon that God made. Yet God has authority over his own creation to use his creation for his service and for an instrument of his will. In this case, for a sign. Just as God has given us the bread and wine for a sign, communion, he's given us the water as a sign for baptism, so he now gives us the sign of a rainbow for his covenanted promises. Verses 14 to 17. And when I shall cover the earth with a cloud, and the bow shall be seen in the sky, then will I remember my covenant which is between me and you, and between every living thing and all flesh, and there shall be no more waters of a flood to destroy all flesh. Therefore the bow shall be in the cloud, that I may see it, and remember the everlasting covenant between God and every living thing and all flesh that is upon the earth. God said yet to Noah, this is the sign of the covenant which I have established between me and all flesh that is upon the earth. Now it's fitting that God should use the rainbow as a sign. The rainbow ordinarily appears when the clouds are covering the earth in times of rain. The clouds gather, and sometimes the clouds are fierce looking, as if we should be swept away by the dark, overwhelming clouds, like another flood's coming. At times it seems the rain will never stop, and then the sun peeks through, and the rainbow appears. When we see the rainbow, we know the rain is almost over, or over. This is God communicating with all mankind to remind them of his promise that he will always stop the rain before it floods the earth. It's fitting that a rainbow should come in a time of rain. The rainbow forever is given new meaning. It is no longer just a wonder of nature created by God. It's now given for a sign. It's a sign of God's everlasting covenant between God and every living thing. Let us pray. Dear Heavenly Father, may we be taught by thy holy word, especially the marring of thy image. And this doesn't only refer just to murder, but any kind of cruelty towards mankind. For you do care much more about the human race than even the human race cares about itself. May we also be reminded that you are constantly and perpetually giving us signs, seasons, the changing of seasons, the tide, the rising of the sun and moon, and now the rainbow, as signs to remember that you are with us and that you have not forgotten us, and that you are not so far away, that you're not intricately involved with every moment of our lives. For you do give us signs throughout every day to remind us that you are reigning in heaven and that you see all that happens upon the earth. And we do pray to be reminded of this, and we do pray these things in thy Son's name. Amen. We conclude our worship with the singing of Psalm 33, verses 18 to 22, just 3 stanzas. Psalm 33, verses 18 to 22, to the tune of martyrdom. The psalm concludes by saying that those that fear God and keep his laws will find mercy and joy, not only in this life, but in the life to come. And those who turn to God will rejoice in God. Psalm 33, verses 18 to 22. Martyrdom. Behold on those that do him fear, the Lord does set his eye, in those who on his mercy do, with confidence rely. From death